And welcome everybody to Serbian Radio Chicago exclusive in partnership with Serbian-American Voters Alliance. We are bringing you the series, Meet the Candidates and Meet Our Political Leaders. And I am so thrilled today to have with us Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, former congressman from our lovely state of Florida, and currently the chairman of Texas GOP. Chairman West, welcome to Serbian Radio Chicago.
It's my pleasure and honor to be with you all. Thank you.
So wonderful to have you. And I have to say, very often, as you know, Serbian-American Voters Alliance, on our board sits a great former congressman, Ted Poe, and we often joke very lovingly that Serbs and Texans are very much alike. We're very similar. We have an opinion on everything. We're hard-headed and very independent. So I'm so happy to have you representing that great state of Texas.
Well, my pleasure. And I think they call that rugged individualism.
That is very true. So just to unpack some things that are happening in our country, let's start with the 2020 election and serious allegations of voter fraud across the nation. Of course, Florida and Texas serve as great examples of how elections are to be held. As you know, I left Chicago and I am now in our wonderful Naples, Florida, and I did not bring my voters' habits from Chicago with me. They were always good habits. But tell me a little bit about what happened in 2020 as far as what you see. We know that Texas refused Dominion voting machines. We still have some pending lawsuits in Maricopa County in Arizona and Atcham County in Michigan.
Yeah, I think there are two things that happened. Number one, you had Republican state legislatures that, for whatever reason, they didn't stand up as strong as they should for their own state's election laws. And that happened in several battleground states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and down in Arizona. So that's why you see a lot of these state legislatures coming back and making sure that they have very strong election laws. And of course, the left realizing that they're not going to get away with this again. That's where you hear the Jim Crow 2.0 and all these other instances of demonization and denigration and talk about voter suppression. And then I think the other thing that happened that is kind of tied to that is that you had these unconstitutional actions being taken in those respective states by governors, by secretaries of state, and by courts, where they actually changed the election law right up to the day of the election, which again is a violation of the Constitution. It was very discouraging and really disappointing when Texas joined about 16 or 17 other states to bring a lawsuit against these states that did these unconstitutional actions with the 2020 November election. And the Supreme Court refused to hear the case because there's only one place that a state can go to have its First Amendment right to petition the government for a redress of grievance against another state, and that's the Supreme Court. And so if a state like Texas and other states that are following their election laws and following the Constitution, then they're supposed to have an equal protection under the law. And so I think those are the type of things that we have to have corrected. And, you know, the left, what they really want to do post November 2020 is codify their unconstitutional actions into law. And that's why you see them trying to push HR 1.
Sure. And continuing this conversation on voter ID as well, and voter ID issues and voter integrity, Georgia just changed their law, I would say a bit too late, and you have deeply rooted connections to the state of Georgia as well. But you see now many sports and entertainers boycotting the state, leaving the state. You just wrote an open letter to Will Smith. Can you please talk about that a little bit? And how is it that we are now connecting having an ID, which is required for everything we do in this country and around the world, to vote? How does that connect to racism?
Well, everything is connected to racism in the minds of the progressive socialist left, because they have taken Marxism and instead of talking about class division, now they're talking about racial division, but it's still Marxism. And so the letter that I wrote to Will Smith, because he decided to move a movie that he was going to be doing called Emancipation out of my home, my birth state of Georgia, elsewhere. And Georgia has become either the second or the third largest movie production facility center in the United States of America after Hollywood. And so I just challenged Will Smith to ask him, what did he see that related to voter suppression? And really, this whole thing, when you look at the council culture emanating from these corporations that have become very fascist and very oligarchical in every way, shape, form. I can't get on an American Airlines plane or Delta Airlines plane without a picture ID. Very few places you can go without a picture ID. And of course, a plane is going to shut its doors and leave at a certain time. You're not going to extend the boarding time just because I'm Black. So again, I think that it's time that we go on offense, and that's what I did with that open letter to Will Smith. And to this point, I have not heard back from him.
So we are gearing up for 2022 and of course looking towards 2024. We know that COVID-19 and this entire 2020 has been such a strange year. But for example, we have governors like Abbott and Governor DeSantis here in Florida who have handled COVID-19 in a very specific and I would say extremely successful way. Our states are open, people are out, things are working, compared to the other states that are not having the same results, and they have more deaths, more cases. But this has also affected how people are voting, and it has affected everything that we see. So I guess my question is, given everything that we know from 2020, looking towards the future elections, and you especially leading that largest segment, largest GOP out of great state of Texas, are our voters now believing the system? How can we correct it, and how can we ensure that people actually want to come out and vote? Because now I feel that they're not believing that holy sacred institution and our agencies.
Well, that's so important. And we've got to restore that sense of integrity, trust, and confidence in our electoral system. I think there was a quote from Joseph Stalin some years ago that said it is not the person that casts the vote, it is the person that counts the vote that matters. Exactly. And so we've got to get back to the point where people believe that their vote is going to be cast and it's going to be counted. You know, last year, April the 14th of 2020, Eric Holder wrote an opinion editorial for the Time magazine that said how coronavirus should permanently change elections in America. And so the whole thing is that they're trying to keep this COVID issue alive because they wanted to continue to affect elections. We should not have mail-in ballot elections here in the United States of America. That's one of the easiest ways you can have voter fraud and voter irregularities. Absentee balloting that we have, you know, for us that in the military, they're deployed across the country. That's a very controlled process and controlled system. It is also a system that we used already with our seniors. But what Eric Holder wanted to do, and the Progressive Socialist left, was this expanded mail-in balloting. And when you look at HR 1, that's one of the things that they're trying to mandate all across the country is mail-in balloting, and then also no review of voter registration rolls. So that just not along with no voter ID. So what does that tell you? This is all about a power grab. This is about corrupting our electoral system. This is about implementing and instituting a system of cheating by way of law. And we cannot have that in America.
And speaking of that, also, our state of Texas is immensely affected by the border crisis that is currently happening. And speaking of these new voters, talk about the border crisis a little bit, because you are right there on the ground. You see it happening consistently, but we have an influx of these new undocumented voters, essentially, who now, given these laws, they don't have to have any kind of an ID. And they are dependent on government assistance. So they will ultimately undermine the legal US voters, no matter what color they are. It's illegal US voters that should count. But here we have these new voters who will just simply replace those who are here to legally vote.
Well, that's the real voter suppression. And as a matter of fact, I'm in downtown Dallas right now for the Republican National Committee spring training meeting. And I'm looking over at the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center. And inside the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center, there are some 3,000 to 4,000. We don't really know the numbers because no one's been allowed in, illegal immigrant males. And these are people that are not here legally. These are people that have, you know, come into the United States of America. They're not really asylum seekers, but they are benefiting from an open border strategy and agenda of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the left. And the whole purpose is to flood a state like Texas and get them onto, their voter rolls so they can get them voting, so that they can permanently stay in power. So this is a very intricate plan. It's very devious. It's very delusional. It's very deranged, but it's very dangerous that we see happening. So when you look at HR 1, when you look at this open borders policy, when you look at all of these illegals that are flooding into the state of Texas, the largest red state in the nation, it all adds up to what the left wants to see happen.
Sure. And speaking of this, of nefarious actions, I want to ask you, honestly, do you feel that there are actors out there who are deliberately, in fact, trying to tear America down and are ready to see us literally burn? And I truly believe America is worth fighting for. I know you do. All of us believe America is worth fighting for, but it seems that there are forces out there that are deliberately putting this kind of stress on our population and trying to incite violence and trying to incite war.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was Barack Obama who said back in 2008 that they wanted to fundamentally transform the United States of America. That's what they continue to do. When you're talking about legislation that changes the composition of our Supreme Court, Article 3 of our Constitution, our judicial branch, that's part of fundamental transformation and taking this country down. When you look at Antifa and Black Lives Matter, these are subversive domestic terrorist organizations, and we need to see it that way. When you look at a U.S. representative like Maxine Waters and what she just recently said, or Democrat Representative Cori Bush from St. Louis, who led violent mobs in St. Louis, resulting in the death of Captain David Dorn, a Black police officer, and attacked the homes of Patty and Mark McCloskey. So yes, there are people that are trying to undermine this constitutional republic. And as Antifa once shouted, no borders, no walls, no USA at all. And this is what has become of what was once the Democrat Party. Now it's a socialist, Marxist, progressive, communist party.
Sure. And you just mentioned Representative Maxine Waters. And my question to you was, leading up to this, we have seen what's been happening in Minneapolis. Yesterday, there was a very high profile case that all of us have been watching, of course, stemming from George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. We saw that, and we were expecting riots in Minneapolis no matter what happened in that court case. But we know what Maxine Waters said. Can we go back to January 6th and remember what President Trump said? Go home peacefully and remember this day, compared to what Maxine Waters says. Well, how is that evening out the field? And clearly what a lot of people on the left have done was directly inciting riots, but somehow the other side is being blamed for just trying to be really civil about these conversations.
Well, there is no level playing field. There's a duplicitous hypocrisy that is out there. And I'll bring this other point up. The young lady that was shot in the back in the Capitol on January the 6th, the left can argue whether or not she should have been in the Capitol. That's not the point. She was shot. She was unarmed. She lost her life. And the Department of Justice under the Biden administration has come out and said there will be no prosecution of the officer that shot that young lady,
Ashley Babbitt,
who was a former veteran of the United States Air Force. Now, if that was a Black female that was shot, you can just imagine what would be happening right now, especially shot in the back. So this hypocrisy has to end, and that's why we have to stay on offense. We cannot be on defense, and we have to continue to call out the progressive socialist left and all of these things, and we have to force them to take corrective actions, like with Maxine Waters, or we got to make sure they pay and their consequences come 2022 with the midterm elections.
And that was the question that I wanted to ask you. How is it that we know immediately the names of police officers who end up shooting different people around the country? And of course, loss of life is always a problem and something that needs to be looked at seriously. But we still don't know, as you said, who shot Ashley Babbitt, and the fact that there is no consequences for that. So you are right. And it's not just that the country is watching, but I can tell you the entire world is watching at what's happening here in America. And last time you and I met, and I was very impressed with the speech that you have given to Northwestern University students. we started talking about foreign policy, and I know that you know a lot about the Balkans, about Serbia, about Kosovo. I was so impressed with the fact that you mentioned the Kosovo battle. We looked at how President Trump and Ambassador Rick Grenell approached that issue, for example, and they just had a different approach and a creative approach overall to US foreign policy. Do you feel that the Biden administration is ready for new creative ways to now approach these heating things that are happening with Russia, with China, with North Korea, with NATO, with the tensions in Ukraine? Can you please talk about that a little bit?
Well, no, I mean, remember, it was the Obama-Biden administration. We saw all of these exact same things. So why would we think it being any different when you have Biden at the top of the ticket and Barack Obama behind the scenes pulling the strings? So this is just a continuation, a third term, if you want to call it that, of Barack Obama. And so Vladimir Putin and Russia, they see that as weakness. Xi Jinping sees it as weakness. Iran sees weakness. North Korea and Kim Jong-un, they see weakness. And so we're going to have more instances of this. And with this decision to completely withdraw out of Afghanistan, which it was the exact same mistake that Barack Obama did in Iraq, we're going to see an uptick of violent Islamic extremism and jihadism as well.
And that exactly leads me to that point of having that conversation about the Balkans. And you know very well what was happening there under the Clinton administration and kind of the threats that we now experience here in this country and in Europe, exactly from what you said, violent jihadism. But I have to ask you, we've witnessed these coups d'etats and regime changes and colored revolutions, if you will, around the world. And it seems that people who know how to play this game, they've used weaknesses of different nations to tear them apart, whether it's racism or whether it was these ethnic tensions in the Balkans, religious tensions elsewhere. Do you feel that that same playbook is now being used on the United States of America, but just using the weakness that we have, which is racism? It seems that that is being something that is inflated to tear us down.
Well, that's, again, it comes back to that Marxism, and Karl Marx was all about class division. Now this is about racial division, but it's still the exact same thing. And what weakness is very enticing. And so when our enemies, our geopolitical enemies, top of the list is China, see us with all of these internal issues and squabbles, and they see a Democrat Party that has taken control of America, and they don't want to protect our borders, they see the opportunity to bring the United States of America down. And so this has to be a very disconcerting period for us here in America. And that's why, leading up to the 2022 midterm elections is so important. We have to be ready to win back the House, win back the Senate, and put a kibosh on Biden and Harris, and not allow them to continue on with this very destructive agenda.
And that will be my final question for you. Yes, we are looking towards 2022, 2024, but is electing new people enough? Because we have witnessed what's been happening around the country last summer. Some of these nefarious forces are ready to burn the country down. Us proving that we are civil, we're ready for a conversation, for diplomatic means, if you will, to solve our differences, given that the country is so polarized. Is it enough?
Well, what we need to have are courageous and principled individuals that are going to stand up and defend this constitutional republic, and not acquiesce, appease, compromise, and believe that they can negotiate with people that do want to burn this country down and destroy it. So we have to say, we stand for the rule of law. Either you stand for the rule of law or you don't, and there will be consequences if you do not stand for the rule of law. That has to be reestablished in the United States of America.
Chairman West, thank you so much for being a part of our program today, and we're looking forward to hearing from you again and from that great state of Texas.
My pleasure. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you as well, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.